You are literally making history to be the first person in the United States not born in the soil, but running for presidency. Talk to us more about this.
Yeah, Rahul, there's been, the United States original Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, laid out the qualifications key things to hold the office of president. And it said that one must be 35 years of age, 14-year resident, and quote unquote natural born. Okay? Natural born, interestingly enough, was never defined. In fact, the Supreme Court of the United States has never defined it. But that was, in 1787. The way the Constitution works, right? You add different amendments. But the 14th Amendment, around the time of the Civil War came, and it said that you cannot distinguish between a natural born citizen and a naturalized citizen.
Hello and welcome to Indian Diaspora Podcast. This is your host Rahul. Today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. He's the man who is running for the president of the US as an independent. He is an inventor of email and he's revolutionizing politics and medicine. Born in India, made in America. Dr. Shiva, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Rahul. Thanks for having me.
We are excited to have you with us. You are literally making history to be the first person in the United States not born in the soil, but running for presidency. Talk to us more about this.
Yeah, Rahul, there's been, the United States original Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, laid out the qualifications key things to hold the office of president. And it said that one must be 35 years of age, 14-year resident, and quote unquote natural born. Okay? Natural born, interestingly enough, was never defined. In fact, the Supreme Court of the United States has never defined it. But that was, in 1787. The way the Constitution works, right? You add different amendments. But the 14th Amendment, around the time of the Civil War came, and it said that you cannot distinguish between a natural born citizen and a naturalized citizen. You just became a naturalized citizen, as I understand, right? In June. I became one in 1983. I came to the United States in 1970. I was 7 years old. And, I think in my 20s, 20 years later, I became not 20 years later, at the age of 20. So the issue has always been, the question has been, well, can a naturalized citizen run for the president? The de facto understanding has been this view, only natural born people can run. Okay. Arnold Schwarzenegger, after he was governor, wanted to run for president. He said, I can't run because I'm not natural born. And when I looked at this, I said, this is absolutely wrong, being who I am, right? Always been a fighter for rights and justice and these kinds of things. And I said, the 14th Amendment says we're all equal protection clause. So that supersedes Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. And no one has ever tested this. People have theoretically talked about it. Scholars have written about it, Harvard professors. One group of professors, one group of academics, and in fact, Congress people have said this is absolutely wrong. And another people, originalists, have said, no, we want to preserve something. We don't even know what they're preserving. Because at the time the Constitution was being signed, there were many people who were quote unquote naturalized citizens. They were born in the West Indies or Britain. And the Constitution, even Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, says that for anyone born, anyone at the time of the signing of the Constitution who may have been a citizen. You see, because some of them were citizens of the colonies. So that means the Constitution was not against people born in other countries. There were, in fact, 7 signers of the Declaration of Independence were born elsewhere. Okay? And interesting enough, a few years after the Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 was passed, the Marquis de Lafayette, who was born in France, the legislature, one of the state legislatures, deemed him to be a natural born citizen and all of his heirs. You see, and in fact, even today, if you and I are both in Boston, if we go to Africa and we adopt 10 kids and bring them here,
Mm-hmm.
do you know they're natural born and they can run? So this whole thing is completely nonsense. It's nonsense because the concept of natural born came from the British, who were into oppressing people. The British are the ones who created this natural born term because so they could leave Britain, exploit people in India, hang out there, have kids there, and they too would be still citizens of Britain. You say? So natural born was a vehicle to preserve the monarchy and the elites. So any U.S. person can leave the United States, go anywhere in the world, have many children, and those children are natural born, even though they're not born on U.S. soil. So the whole term is nonsense. Okay. So I decided to run. And, when I decided to run for United States Senate, I was the one who exposed the fact that the government has a backdoor portal into Twitter. We're the ones who figured out there's serious fraud in the voting machines. If an engineer like me doesn't run, or people like us, meaning smart people, not the standard top-down celebrities run, you're never going to have any significant change, you say? So my deciding to run really was very disruptive, be it in 2018 against Elizabeth Warren, where we exposed she was not an Indian, right? She's a fake Indian. And then running in 2020. So my decision to run for president came from the fact that we have developed a global movement for truth, freedom, health. After 2020, I was the one who exposed the inequity of the lockdown, the stupidity of the science, a lot of things. As a scientist who practices, not as some random quote unquote conspiracy theorist, which is what people like to brand you when you share the truth. But anyway, that journey, we ended up about 500 million people in the world knew about our movement. 500,000 people now have joined the movement for truth, freedom, health. Go to truthfreedomhealth.com to find more about that. So we realized we needed to keep moving forward. So it was a decision made by thousands of Americans in our movement to say, Dr. Shiva must run for president because we would now open up opportunities for a whole new discourse. And so my running for president, I am the first ever candidate who's on the ballot in nearly every state for ballot, who's a first naturalized citizen. Now, don't you think besides you, Rahul, and a few other, everyone should be covering this? And the journey, and the real question is, why isn't the New York Times covering this? They'll cover, this guy Vivek Ramaswamy or other people who has a very, very, frankly, a fraudulent history in my view. He made up companies. They'll cover that. But they will not cover someone like me who's truly against establishment politics. This is too dangerous. And this is where the real prejudice is. So we have to go to independent, open-minded, true journalists like yourself, and which are coming bottoms up. So many of these organizations on the left or the right, the media companies, they cover people that are in their clique, you see? Who are acceptable. Now, even though I have 4 degrees from MIT, invented email, won every award, I'm not acceptable because I have chosen in many opportunities where I have the opportunity to be co-opted to not become part of them because of my, which we'll talk about, my journey, what brings me here. So again, think about this to every person listening. I'm the first person in the world, in the United States, who has been a naturalized citizen who is on the ballot. And people said, oh, you can't run, you can't be on the ballot. So we have 6 lawsuits that we're filing. But a number of lawsuits we've won. A number of the states have said, no, he has every right to be on the ballot. It is up to Congress to decide for a federal office. So, I've had to become my own lawyer. We've won various lawsuits. And we're moving some up all the way to the Supreme Court. So most lawyers will not take on precedential setting lawsuits because, I filed my Supreme Court case, 3 weeks ago. A lawyer would have charged $2 to $3 million. We did it on our own. I did it on my own. So the point is, for everyone listening, we are ensuring that the spirit of the U.S. Constitution is alive because the founders who framed it recognized things would be changing, recognized that the laws that they made would need to be changed. So this is what we're doing. And that's what my life journey has been about, always being an innovator, doing what people thought was impossible. People thought when I was 14, you couldn't create email. People didn't think we could eliminate animal testing. People didn't think that a non-quote unquote natural born, which is not defined, person could ever run for president. Well, we are running.
Yes. And you are accepted into some state ballots, right? Which states are those?
Well, so we are accepted in 46 state ballots. Now, very important to understand this. Now, different states have different rules to get on the ballot. Regardless
Mhm.
of the rules, the fundamental thing is you have to get electors. The electors are the one to vote for you. So in California, we had to find 108 electors. No one's done that, okay? To get on as a truly non-party independent candidate, as a write-in. So there's two ways you can vote for someone on a ballot. You can write their name in, like write in Dr. Shiva. So everyone listening, you can, except for New Mexico, Hawaii, Alaska, and Nevada, you can write in Dr. Shiva. In some of those states, you'll see our name printed, okay?
Yeah.
And you can just, circle the hole. So even getting on as a write-in is not easy because you can write in Mickey Mouse, but they're not going to count the vote. But when you write in Dr. Shiva, you have to have your electors. You have to file paperwork, okay? But in 13 states, we also got our name listed, and we had to collect hundreds of thousands of signatures. And we didn't pay for these signatures. All these other people get on the ballot. They have a 20, I call him Booby effing Kennedy. He raised $20 million to get on the ballot, and then he dropped, and then he pocketed that money. We did this, Rahul, with actual volunteers. Quite extraordinary, which means we have a bottoms-up movement of working people. And this is also what's extraordinary about what we're doing. This is not a top-down movement. I mean, I work full-time as a scientist, as an engineer, as an inventor, as a business person. If you go to my Twitter feed, you'll see electricians, plumbers, butchers, IT people. A completely different campaign. So we are also redefining what victory means. Right? So, yes, so everyone listening, you can go, if you don't see my name, you can write in my name except in those 4 states, and they will be counted. Okay? They have to count them by law. So we're on the ballot in 46 states. Some of them, Massachusetts, you'll see my name listed, number 1. Okay? Ayyadurai should be number 1. Some states play rules. They flip it because they don't want my name to be on top. Shiva Ayyadurai, right?
Sure.
So in Washington State, in Iowa, in Idaho, in Mississippi, in Kentucky, in Minnesota, okay? I'm missing a couple of states, okay? In New Jersey, which is where a predominant Indian population is, we got on the ballot. Everything's set up. Then Kamala Harris, the Indian, had the New Jersey Democratic Party file a lawsuit to kick me off, arguing that natural born nonsense. So that's gone up all the way up to the United States Supreme Court now. Okay? In Wisconsin, we got on the ballot, and Trump people, and we're going to take that. You see, they do not want outside people, Rahul, of my caliber, my quality, who did not co-opt and are top down. We're actually doing the hard work. But they don't want this because they can't. It's uncontrollable. My policies are the policies that people want, not the policies that AIPAC or some lobby is going to control me on. So, very different campaign.
Great reflection here. In fact, I liked how we began from the Constitution. America is a democracy in practice, in the quest of becoming a more perfect union, right? And if you reflect back on let's say suffrage movement that women in America have to go through, or even 14th Amendment, the right of equality, it's been civic action every time.
You nailed it.
This brings me to the question, Dr. Shiva. Should there be a constitution amendment on, specifically defining the case of being naturally born?
It's a good question.
Are there civic groups working on that in the nation today?
So let's talk. You brought up the women's suffrage movement. How did that happen? It's not some NGO does this. NGOs do nothing, okay, except take money and donations. The reality is, how did the women win the right to vote? Let's walk through that. And this will give you the understanding that the framers of the Constitution knew that they wanted bloodless revolutions, okay? So women, prior to 1920, when they didn't have the right to vote, by the way, Afghan women in Afghanistan had the right to vote before U.S. women. Just a side note, right? But so American women did not have the right to vote. Quite extraordinary, okay? So what did they do? Well, they initially went to Congress, and they said, we should have the right to vote. They went to met with Democrats and Republicans, and they literally laughed out Susan B. Anthony. They laughed at her. So she started building a bottoms-up movement. In fact, women started running for president, even though they couldn't vote. Running for the office is a First Amendment right. You don't have to fulfill those qualifications are to hold the office. This is very important. Okay? those qualifications are to hold the office. Running
Mm-hmm.
for the office is a First Amendment right. It took me a while to really wrap myself around this constitutional right. And I can say this with unequivocal confidence is because there have been many people who've run for president, even though they were not, quote unquote, eligible to hold the office. Alinda Janis in 1976 was a woman who was 33 years old. In 2012, a woman was 28 years old, Peter Lindsay. She ran and she got on the ballot in many states. You see, people don't understand. One is holding the office. Before that, you have to be elected, and before that, you have to run. Joe Biden was 29 years old when he ran for the office of Senate. You have to be 30. It's a First Amendment right. Anyone can run. It's the highest protected form of speech. Okay? Again, problem is people don't learn civics anymore. They don't understand. And I would say 95% of the judges and lawyers don't understand this. In fact, I would say most of the law students don't understand this. Now, I've had to become, in some ways, a practicing lawyer in many areas myself. And it's a very interesting field. But so when in the suffrage movement, women ran and they, in fact, got on the ballot. The point is, the founders wanted the First Amendment so you could run, you could even get elected, and then it would go to Congress, which is the highest body, and Congress would have to be facing a decision. Oh my God, everyone wants Dr. Shiva. He's gotten, let's say, 280 electoral votes, but the Constitution says only natural born. So they would have to have that discussion, and they would have to say, shoot, we better let Dr. Shiva win because we could have a revolution. That would be a bloodless revolution. This is precisely what happened in Trump versus Anderson, March of 2024. The state of Colorado said Trump cannot hold the office of president because he conducted an insurrection. And they actually went all the way up to the Colorado State Supreme Court. They acknowledged that he did, in their view, did an insurrection. Therefore, he violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And based on the inability to hold the office, they said, we're going to remove him off the ballot. Other states kept him on the ballot. Guess what the Supreme Court did of the United States? They swooped in. And they said, you cannot do this. Anyone can run and be elected. Only Congress can decide. You see, it's a very important point. Federal offices, they said states can only decide local office. That was a 9-0 ruling, Rahul. Well, look what's happened to me. I'm on the ballot in certain states. And by the way, Sotomayor, who wrote one of the opinions, said that the reason we're against this is you cannot have a patchwork of states. We are the United States, and these are federal offices. One state cannot say we don't want him because of some provision to hold the office. So they forced, the Supreme Court said, so my Supreme Court case that I've taken rules the same thing. Hey, look, you forced Colorado to put Trump back on the ballot because you didn't want a patchwork of states. So I've nailed the legal arguments. It's unequivocal. My legal arguments are absolutely tight. The issue is the political issue. Will the Supreme Court do anything about it? But Congress should do something. But how will Congress do anything? This is going to happen with NGOs. It's going to happen with someone like me actually pushing the envelope and running. You see? So this is the difference between a person sitting in an academic institution writing papers, talking as a grifter on social media. Oh, you can't run, all, versus someone who jumps into the arena, works day and night, builds a movement to address this issue. The position we're saying is there's 25 million Americans in the United States. You cannot treat them as second-class citizens. People say, oh, you can do everything, Dr. Shiva, but run for president. No. There's a very famous a guy by the name of, he's a professor at State University of New York. He said, look, the highest reflection of equality is the ability to run for president. It's a symbol. So if you're telling me I can go into every room, you can go to all those restaurants, Rahul, but you can't go into that restaurant. That's only reserved for white people. You can do you can be an inventor of email. You can get a PhD at MIT. You can start $100 million companies, but you know what? You can't run for president. I say F you to that. It's wrong. And people what happens is, Rahul, people accept injustice. It's a brainwashing. Oh, well, you should be happy you made it to America. No, equal. Equal means equal. It says equal protection clause. So mathematics, 1.5 is not equal to 1.6. 1.5 is equal to 1.5. Equal means equal. Don't use the word equal then. You should say it's unequal protection clause. So
I would once again say this is the civic action that you're talking about here, which is responsibility of every citizen is what makes America. For
Wow.
anybody who's questioning this, the very idea of participating in this, for me as a new American, is what the beauty of America is.
Right. So
The
America,
Constitution's equality applies to all.
because of
Back to you.
because of the history of people exercising their rights,
Yeah,
America has expanded that freedom. That's why people want to come here. In other
sure.
countries, because of their history of oppression and fascism and whatever, right? They haven't had the opportunity, or they've shirked away from those
Yeah,
sacrifices.
yeah,
So every step here has been done with courage and actually doing it.
sure.
Doing it. Problem with
Yeah,
social media is people talk all day.
yeah,
And they've made, which is what was the goal of Edward Bernays, was to make people,
yeah,
to be entertained, to watch.
yeah.
So I always jump into stuff, man. So that's what we've done.
Excellent. Excellent. Dr. Shiva, I want to say this. If you go to the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, they have an exhibit area. One of the exhibits says is that so far, natural born citizens can only run for president, but that's only so far. So even that exhibit in the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia keeps it open to the possibility
No,
of
but they're wrong.
interpretation of
I've
this.
already shown I can run. I'm on the ballot. So
Yeah,
whoever
yeah.
wrote that is an idiot. Sorry to say, they're an idiot. They do not know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
So that was an idiot who wrote that. Anyone can run for the office of president. It is a
sure.
First Amendment right.
Yes,
That is the issue that we're saying the Supreme Court should unequivocally rule on.
sure.
Because Joe Biden ran when he was
Yeah,
29 and he got
yeah,
elected. Now, then
yes,
Congress said Joe Biden cannot assume the office of Senate
yeah,
until he hits 30, right? So
yeah,
the issue is, this is how the framers wanted it.
sure.
Think about, let's say sometime in the future, there's no one living after the age of 30, or people are dying, okay?
Mm,
An 18-year-old wants to run for office. And they actually win because there's more 18-year-olds. But the
yeah,
Constitution says you have to be 35.
yeah,
Congress would say, wait a minute, of course an 18-year-old. You see what I'm saying?
yeah.
The founders knew things would change.
Change.
So they
Yeah,
wanted, the First Amendment is the way the change occurs. Then
yeah,
Congress decides, which is a representative body. So if
yeah,
the majority of people in the United States want me, Congress would have to say, wow, people want him. Naturally
yeah.
born, what do we do with that?
Sure.
Okay, so that's how change
Right.
occurs. It occurs by doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's progress in our discussion now. Let's discuss policies. Yeah. I want to take a practical viewpoint here, right? We have been a bi-party system. There are policies that both the sides stand for. Many of them might be disillusioned by those policies, right? Talk to us, the brand that is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, what alternative he brings to the table, and let's break that down into policies that would affect the life of ordinary Americans and why they should choose you over others.
Right. So, Rahul, if you look at our campaign, our movement, first of all, it is made up of all ordinary Americans, as I mentioned.
Hmm.
And the people who are attracted to our movement, our campaign, Shiva for President, peoplewantogo.com or truthfreedomhealth.com, is those people who have seen this two-party system, okay? And they've seen that it has not, you were an executive, right? At some point,
Yes.
you get
Yes.
reports. Most executives get a report. Sometimes, the Harvard business models, it's called a key performance indicator report.
Hmm.
So if I gave you a KPI report, the acronym for key performance indicator, you said, let us judge these two parties. And I can give you two variables to judge them: cost of living and lifespan. Okay? Cost
Hmm.
of living and lifespan. Now so if you go from 1970 till today, lifespan is going down. Think about that. If you have a
Hmm.
child today, your child will have a shorter lifespan than you. So just consider that for a second. It's
Hmm.
not because of COVID. So just let that sink in. And then cost of living has been explosively going upward because we have the printing of money. Trump printed
Hmm.
$8.2 trillion. Obama printed $8 trillion, right?
Hmm.
And the printing of money is based on the United States having the luxury of being the reserve currency. And economic theoreticians now say, print money, it's okay, as long as we're the reserve currency. Well, how does the U.S. maintain reserve currency status? It is not because of gold. It is not because of innovation. It is not because of petroleum anymore behind the dollar. It's because of an aircraft carrier. It's because of F-15s. It's because having some organization like Zionist Israel. So behind the almighty dollar And the maintenance of that ability to print money, which, by the way, devalues other countries' currencies, and devalues the average American, is this concept of reserve currency. All right. So once you understand that, you realize that it's a Ponzi game that's being played on the American people. And whether it's Democrat or Republican, if people go to our site, I have that graph from 1970 till today. Cost of living is going up, lifespan is going down. So if you just look at that, we need a systemic change. You can't say, well, I'm going to choose this person, that they're going to do a little bit better. No, your lifespan's going down. Doesn't matter. If you are running a company, sales are going down every year. Oh yeah, everything's fine. I'm going to bring, you wouldn't do that. You'd be out of business. So this is the systemic problem that we have put forward in a very simple layman's term. And we have people handing out these cards. I don't have one here, but if you go to Shiva for President and the free downloads, you'll see people are passing out millions of these cards to wake people up. Wait a minute. It doesn't matter where Trump or Kamala Harris win. They're playing the same game on you. They're moving capital around. So now so that's the basis. Now, how are they able to do this? Well, number one, they have to manipulate people. And the way manipulation occurs is through denying people the First Amendment. And this is what happened on November 16, 2018, when Trump signed CISA into law, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. That law allowed government to create a backdoor portal, government, to every private social media company to outsource censorship. Who discovered that? I did in my 2020 lawsuit, when I was thrown off Twitter for precisely exposing the fact that the state of Massachusetts deleted my ballot images when I rightfully, by all evidence, won the Republican primary. When I asked for that, they gloated, they deleted it. I took on the lawsuit, no lawyer did, and I won the preliminary injunction in federal court. But none of these other people, including all of these major media guys, dare cover my lawsuit and the victory. But about 500 million people throughout the world learned about it. This is why you can't trust the mainstream media. They waited 2 years. And then they promote Elon Musk as though he's some fighter. He has openly said free speech does not equal free reach. He's part of the establishment. Where Elon Musk begins and government ends, nobody knows. So what is the central policy? We must eliminate government's backdoor portals into social media companies. There is no First Amendment. Number one. Number two, I'm a big proponent of recognizing people talk about blockchain and Bitcoin. We have freedom. No, you don't. Because all of these transactions are done through major infrastructure owned by 4 telecom companies. The internet was designed for we the people. It is no longer for we the people. The solution, one is a technology solution, which is mesh networks, peer-to-peer networks that we own. The technology's there. The institution, I believe, that should hold this is the United States Postal Service. They need to upgrade themselves. The Postal Service was created to ensure free speech equals free reach. That was Franklin's vision. So I could send you a letter. You could send me a letter. And if someone intervened, Rahul, it was a 22-year prison term. We don't have that on email anymore. Gmail is a private company. So this is a foundational thing. Only I can see this as someone who's been in technology and as someone who wants freedom. So those two policies must be done to preserve the First Amendment in the modern age. Otherwise, we're a surveillance state. Okay? None of these candidates can even comprehend this because they don't care, because they're part of that. They want to do surveillance. Trump is the one who passed it, and yet he talks about free speech. Complete nonsense. The second thing, so now we've talked about First Amendment. The other thing we need to talk about is education. You know, those of us who are immigrants, particularly, we know the power of education. It is what liberated us. You know, I came from a low caste Indian family. You will find very few Indians here, right? My parents always beat into me this education. My mom was this dark-skinned Indian woman in 1940 who got a mathematics degree at a time when women weren't getting degrees. And there's a picture of her with all these white-skinned Indian guys, light-skinned guys in turbans. And there's this dark-skinned Indian woman, one person out of 100 men. Quite an extraordinary woman, but it is education. Well, the educational system today must teach people systems thinking. Jay Forrester, one of my mentors, wanted to do it at the kindergarten age. What is systems thinking? It's a field of education and science that came out in 1920s. And it says that we live in a complex world. You can't just study the parts anymore. You must understand the interconnections between those parts. Field of logistics, supply chain. If you don't know systems, healthcare systems, transportation systems, we're educating a bunch of idiots, and they can be manipulated. So my view, the educational system must have systems thinking all throughout. The number two part is the student loan thing. Okay? before the 1970s, parents didn't really, people didn't go to college. They went to learn a skill to make wealth. I'm an electrician. I'm a plumber. Somewhere along the way, after the 1970s, with the creation of the Department of Education, everything became get a college degree. Now, getting a college degree typically put the family into debt, $100,000, $200,000 loan. And they called it a student loan. But it's really not a student loan. So the parents take the money and it goes to tuition to the college. Most of these colleges have cranked up their university fees. And what are they doing with that tuition money? They invest it. And they're paying their money managers. Harvard paid their money manager a couple of years ago, $56 million, 5 guys. So so the kid is studying, I don't know, transgenderism of aardvark science or some degree he's getting, and he can't get a job. And the university got $200,000. Okay. And parents have co-signed the loan, which means they may have to sell their home. My view is if you're going to take a loan in this model, the universities must co-sign that loan. That must be a law. Now, why is that a good law? Okay, so you have a kid who, most 17, 18-year-olds don't even know what the hell they want. You're just out of being 12 years old, right? How do you know what you want? So you need guidance for those people. So the university, if I had to co-sign a loan for $200,000, I'm going to make sure that kid leaves and he has at least, he can study some aardvark science and whatever, some crazy thing that, fine, do that as a hobby, but make sure you have a skill. So you can, right? So that is it's a revolutionary policy. Again, this comes from taking a systems approach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. They were polymath, in ancient times, let's say medieval Europe, or even in ancient Asian civilizations who had, knowledge of multiple fields, and they could cross-pollinate, connect them, and develop new ideas. That's the kind of education we need. Now, coming back to sorry, carry on. Finish your thought.
So what I'm saying is that is when we talk about my journey, my entire life journey was forced me, Rahul, to be able to integrate stuff.
Sure.
And we live in a world where you're looking at the elephant, and if you just point the people at the trunk, they think it's a snake. If you point the people at the tail, they think it's like the blind man.
Yeah.
So this is how manipulation takes place. So I've given you a very foundational policy on First Amendment in the new age of information. Another foundational policy on education. There's many others. I don't know if you want me to continue.
No, absolutely. In fact, I want to come back to the policy and really wrap it around. Right? You said it nicely in your opening statement. Life expectancy and the cost of living.
Going down.
Which is what
life expectancy is going down.
It's going down.
So this is a systemic issue. The policies that have been done, and you're talking to a molecular systems biologist here who writes papers in the leading journals in the world. The policies that these idiots have done has destroyed your biology. So think about that. Policy at a meta level is affecting people at the microscopic level.
Absolutely.
And it's the immense amount of stress, the destruction of the immune system. You can't get proper food. Your kids aren't being educated. The average American only has $400 in savings in their bank account for a rainy day. You have corrupt leaders. You have people like Booby Kennedy, as I call him. He openly says personal integrity and public integrity are two different things. This is not leadership. Your personal integrity and your public integrity must be one. You can't be saying, I care for children, and then be fine with bombing Gaza. And that's what these people do. So these multiple systems are putting immense stress on the individual's biology. That is why lifespan is going. Now, I have a solution to each one of those.
Absolutely.
So,
the PFAS in water, right? Forever chemicals or the food system, that is an example of the impact of biology or a human being's life that you're mentioning about. Now, I want to move ahead, Dr. Shiva. So we reflected on the challenges that an ordinary American faces, right? In terms of solutions, why you? Why would you only be the savior who would be able to save them? And this is for somebody who is, they're reflecting whether to go Republican, Democrat, where there are systems behind them, there are people behind them, institutions supporting them, versus an independent candidate and the uphill battle of fighting established forces in the nation. Why you in terms of implementation of those ideas?
So Rahul, what I want people to do is close their eyes for a second and just consider this. The question that you've asked, and please don't take this personally,
Sure.
The question itself is within the rubric of their institutions of power, profit, and control. Okay?
Absolutely. I
Because
admit
it's saying them. What I'm saying is now let go of that and move into a different universe of what winning means at a very fundamental level. Winning, as history has always shown, when ordinary people win, or any human being wins, is when they raise their consciousness. When an understanding comes into them, oh, I need to get educated. That changed the world, right? Oh, fire. I need fire, right? You see, when people's consciousness changed, oh, I shouldn't be living out in the dirt, right? When consciousness changed, overnight things change. That's a revolution. Now, the situation we live in directly connected to the very simple issue. Lifespan is going down, cost of living is going up. And it doesn't matter who the hell you voted for. They've both done that to you. They both destroyed your biology. Now, choosing between Tweedledee and Tweedledum, both of them, by the way, who are absolutely fine with destroying the people in the Middle East, absolutely fine starting wars, absolutely fine butchering people, absolutely fine printing money all day, maybe with a little tweaks, okay? These people, the 0.0001% who subjugate the 8 billion people all over the planet, why are we even considering them? Who are they? Look at their backgrounds. Where did they come from? Did they actually go through the journey bottoms up? So once you realize they haven't, then you come to a single conclusion. None of these people can save you. You come to the conclusion you must save yourself. So my campaign has a simple slogan: save yourself. Now, my running for president gives people the opportunity to understand what happens when you start wanting to save yourself. My life is a reflection of that. And the knowledge and the tools that I've created, the positions I've created, this gives people a completely different vantage point. And the win here, the victory is not whether one idiot or the other idiot wins, because they're going to keep printing money. They're going to keep invading other countries. They're going to keep subjugating other people. Cost of living is going to go up and lifespan is going to go down. They're not going to substantially change that. What is going to change is when the individual realizes no one is coming to save me. There is no savior. Okay? There's no someone coming from above. This is all a myth. Change has always happened when you decided you wanted to do well, increase your wealth, increase your health. You said, let me go exercise. Let me figure out what foods are right for me. You had to make that decision. So that is a victory. So our movement is now finding incredible people. They're saying, yeah, Dr. Shiva is saying absolutely right. Look at this graph. Why would I do this? It's like being an idiot. So we need a systemic change. And the winning here is anyone who votes or writes in my name has moved through a state of consciousness. That's powerful. And so you don't need a lot of people to shift the change. You need about 3 to 5% of people to get that. And it's over. Because when you have enough molecules vibrating in a system or consciousness, it's over. You see? It took a while for people to understand, wait a minute, it's wrong to lynch a black man. Consciousness change. It's wrong to treat women like that. It is absolutely wrong to have second-class citizens in the United States. It's going to seem absurd because of what I've done to say, what do you mean you can't run for president? You took the oath of allegiance. You put your time in here. In fact, your oath of allegiance I took as a naturalized citizen. Natural-born citizens don't even have to take that oath. So who is more? So anyway, so we are raising people's consciousness. So if you look at our movement and you look at the videos, these are everyday people. And 99.999% of them are not my color. They're not Indians. They're everyday, white, ordinary Americans who are appreciating my color with a name like Shiva Ayyadurai because they get it. And that is a very high state of consciousness. And we have leaders all over the United States, and we're building this movement. How that is a victory. And we've done that, Rahul, with raising only $50,000. Think about that. Trump and Kamala Harris combined, I mean, it's $15 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, and they take money from, and then, people are writing checks out for Kamala Harris and Trump who only have $400 in their bank account. This is thievery.
Yeah.
We're not asking people for money. We're asking for people to get on the ground. If you go to truthfreedomhealth.com, if you go to shattertheswarm.com, every family should watch that video. That video took me 50 years to do. A 15-minute video which explains how the few control the many. And then we have a free lecture series. Go to Get Off the Plantation, Why You Must Change Your Mind.
Sure.
So that is what the victory is, Ron. We have to change redefine victory. See, they are
Yeah.
creating like if you ever saw that movie Gladiator,
Yeah.
where the Roman says, oh yeah, we need to create a distraction for the masses. So
Yeah.
the elections are selections. They decide who gets even on the ballot. And that's what they want to restrict you
Yeah.
on the ballot. Well, we've busted through that. Then the next thing is they try to make you invisible on the media. We've busted through that. So it is a struggle. It is a fight. This is a real fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It is a fight, right?
the issue,
I want to try
to answer your question, Raul, people should vote for me if they want to save themselves, if they want to transform themselves in a very fundamental way and break from this. It is scary for some people thinking, oh my God, Trump or Harris they're going to do this. Look at that graph.
Absolutely.
What has changed? Lifespan is going down. Cost of living is going up. They continue to print money.
Right.
So just look at the data. So most people are in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
A woman may have a husband who beats her all the time. One day he brings her a flower. She goes, oh, isn't he so nice? Well, you forgot his history, right? So it is hard for people to get out of these abusive relationships. And that is what we're letting people to understand.
The Stockholm Syndrome.
It is a Stockholm Syndrome. Trump said he was going to do this, this, and this. He was going to lock up Hillary. Nope. He locked up his people. He said he was going to drain the swamp. He brought in the swamp. Okay? These people, and he said he wasn't going to conduct a war. He did. He conducted the biggest war on the American people, which was this thing called the quote-unquote pandemic, which locked down people. 16 trillion affected the economy. 600 billionaires made $2.3 trillion. The facts are right in front of us.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to reflect further on some policies. Let's suppose you become the president. Let's take foreign policy. A lot of Americans are concerned about the stance that America has taken, in, let's say, Israel versus Palestine conflict.
Yeah.
Or you have Iran, or you have China as an economic rival against the U.S. Talk to us about the foreign policy strategy that you would have as a president.
Look, foreign policy, Rahul, is intimately related to domestic economic policy. So if you understand this fundamental issue that the United States Ponzi scheme of wealth today is created on the printing of money. So this is fundamental that people need to understand. And the only reason that the United States can print money is because it is a reserve currency. Reserve currency means every other nation must trade in the dollar. Okay, just simply put, if you don't know what that is. Not to you, Rahul, but to others. So how does the United States maintain that status? Is it because it does manufacturing better than anyone else? No, China does. Is it because it develops software better than anyone else? No, that's not true. It does it because it has stealth bombers. It has Israel in the Middle East. Okay. It has military might. It has dictators that the United States supports, and it supports imperialist wars. Period. Without this fundamental framework, the United States cannot be able to print money. Okay? Foreign policy is related directly to domestic policy. And again, this is from a system standpoint. People talk about economic policy and they talk about foreign. You cannot. So U.S. foreign policy has been dictated by the desire to maintain its reserve currency status. So it's very important to understand. All of U.S. foreign policy comes from that. That means no one else can be an equal power militarily to the United States. And if someone else comes up, they must be destroyed. So 1978, Zbigniew Brzezinski laid this theory out. Kissinger did too, but Brzezinski continued. And one of the targets was Russia could never be anywhere near the United States power. And so Brzezinski said that Russia should be broken up into 3 sub-areas. The Eurasia part, the Siberian part, and you can go read it, and the Far East part. This was his architecture because Russia had a huge history of the Russian people fighting a bottoms-up movement, the Workers' Revolution of 1917. It was the Russian people who won World War II. 25 million people were killed fighting the Nazis and fascism. So it's a serious threat to U.S. imperialism. So that was the architecture that was laid out. And if you see, that's what's played itself out. So you had to destroy the Soviet Union. Gorbachev was installed. And there's enough work written about this as a U.S. puppet. He served to break up Russia. And then Bush comes in and he said that we will, he assured Gorbachev that United States will never move 1 inch east of West Germany, but they did. All those countries are made part of NATO. And then in 2014, another set of people basically the United States installed their puppet, a neo-Nazi in Ukraine. And this really perturbed many of the old-time Russians who fought Nazis. But the goal has been Russia. So now what has occurred is the goal is to pull Russia into a two-front war. This is all very well architected, Ukraine and the Middle East. And the way you're going to pull Russia into the Middle East and try to weaken them is you must have Iran getting involved in the war. But in order to get Iran into the war, you must go hammer Gaza and Lebanon and commit genocide. You must make it so hard for Iran not to get involved. But once Iran gets involved, Russia's going to get involved. Okay? So everything we're seeing is for the United States to maintain preeminence of the dollar, not through innovation, not through creating smarter people, but through military might. And this is a very, very effed up policy. Okay? It is a policy of land grabbing through genocide. It is a policy of land grabbing or to create wealth, not through through a process of integrity, which is what the founders wanted. So U.S. foreign policy is dictated by Zionism. And Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism. Zionism is racism in the service of imperialism. It's a philosophy. It's a political ideology that a few can control the many. No different than you have Hinduism. And some people promoted the caste system, which is not in the Sankaracharya movement. And people studied. It was, it was something done so a few people could say they were better so you could pay everyone else less. Nazism was this. So people need to get this through their head. They always take some good stuff from some religion and they manipulate it because religion is very emotional. You say?
Yeah.
So our great gurus and rishis never talked about the caste system. In fact, they fought against it. But Brahmanism or if you look at Nazism or Zionism, it's a political ideology, which is done and perpetuated so you could justify genocide. You could justify just stealing people's stuff. But so once you understand the base level of this, you recognize U.S. foreign policy is to land grab and you need military might to print money. And that will all occur at the plight of the ordinary American worker. Because the trajectory that the elite sees to create a world may be of 500 million people. Why do you need all these people? I mean, you've run a company, Rahul. You have revenue, expenses, profit. Well, I think it's a deliberate thing. Why do we want to educate all these people? That's a lot of expense. Robots are coming. Rahul, you could have 10 robots. Do you really need to hire employees and train them and do HR and pay them Medicare and FICA and all this? I mean, seriously, I think people have done a spreadsheet on this. So one trajectory is you don't value human life. That's why lifespan's going down. You are seeing a different world for perhaps you and 500 million other people. An Elysium where you don't need so many people. The other world is for ordinary people to realize this is going on. And maybe there's an extraordinary world we could create with 8 billion people who recognize their own divinity and who they are and their infinite skills and capabilities and idea for creation. So this is the juncture that we're at in humanity. Are we going to go to a mechanistic world where a few with machines control the world for their benefit? Or are we going to have a world where we unleash human creativity? And that is what I offer because I've been through that journey. I understand this at a very deeply personal level.
So we reflected on the foreign policy. One more reflection on policy is climate change versus energy leadership. I want to elaborate more. I had the privilege, Dr. Shiva, of living in what I call as heart of America, Wisconsin, traveling to rural Michigan, Ohio, Western Virginia. Let's say many Americans, they have dependency on coal mines, right? That's what they grew up in. That's the skill, that's the trade they knew. Or fossil fuels in Texas, Now that's one America, right? As much as the reality of this other America, let's say Gen Z, or people affected by climate change, their house is being flooded, right? And a leader has to balance these both Americas, these both realities. What would be your policy approach of having leadership in traditional energy sources and vocation lives tied to that, but also being an innovator in climate change, modern clean energy, and how would you balance that?
Yeah, so Rahul, the entire climate change carbon tax scam, that's what it is not based on any science. And we should discuss that. It is based on further subjugating the masses of 8 billion people. And it's a scam. And I want to discuss that. And I'm going to discuss that as an engineering scientist who has 4 degrees from MIT, who's explored this very deeply without any horse in the game. But just to be clear on the foreign policy stuff, one of the points I want to finish up was we should cut all funding to Israel, all funding. U.S. defense budget should focus on protecting its borders. We should not be participating in any of these imperialist wars at all. It doesn't serve America at all. It serves a small set of people who want to create that world. I hope that's clear. When we say America, which America are we talking about? That small set of people who want to create an Elysium for themselves, or are we talking about the vast majority of the 330 million American people? You say? There's 2 different Americas here, 2 different American pies here. The climate change carbon tax scam is part of that systemic goal of enslaving people. So first we need to understand there's carbon, which is the atom, carbon, which is in the periodic chart, and there's CO2, which is a molecule, which is a greenhouse gas. There's certain things that are undeniably true. Yes, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere do increase temperature. No one will argue with that. The issue is by how much? How much is a goal? I can give you a certain amount of arsenic and it'll help your heart health, or a certain amount of mercury. If I give you too much, it's going to destroy you, okay? In science, we're focused on how much, dosaging. How much? Now, if you look at the actual records, we're at the lowest level of CO2 ever in the history of the Earth that we know. The time that when the CO2 levels, I forget the exact number, went to, it was higher than what we have today. That's when life emerged. You need CO2, okay? So some set of people decided, and by the way, this wasn't done by scientists. They just made it up. And the guy that made it up was a guy at NASA who said the temperature is 14 degrees and it's climbing in 1987, and it wasn't climbing, or 1984. It was actually going down. So he made and he said the Earth's average temperature is 15 degrees. And in a New York Times footnote, he changed the average temperature to be 14. It's called 14 is a new 50. Okay? And around this, a set of elites came together and they created, and I have a video out there people should watch. It's on the climate change, why it was good we pulled out of the Paris Accords. The Paris Accords, if you talk to any intelligent person and you actually sit with them and you say, tell me one benefit of the Paris Accords. What does the Paris Accords do? It allows China to double their pollution from 11 million metric tons to 22. India can go from 3 to 6. Okay? So you're doubling pollution. How is this valuable? Well, let me tell you what the scam is. The video does it better. The scam is that these countries or the companies will have to buy carbon credits, which is a credit to offset the carbon that you're putting out. Carbon credits are an instrument now being sold as a commodity on the financial markets. Carbon credits are going up, and there's a limited number of carbon credits. In fact, Al Gore is a member, is a director of the company that tracks the carbon credits. You see? And it's the carbon tax credit scam. The underlying physics of this is very simple. How do you determine that CO2 is going up, and does that CO2 affect temperature? It's a complex equation. It's a very complex equation. Well, in science, evidence is reproducible predictions. That's the definition of evidence. If I created a mathematical model and I today put the input as 22, 1, and 5, and the output was 1, tomorrow if I put 22, 1, and 5, it should be 1, right? Suppose the next time I do 22, 1, and 5, it's 10, and 20, and 30. That's not a model. There are 120 models, if you go through the IPCC report, on predicting carbon, CO2 affecting temperature.
Because it's so complicated, right?
What's that?
Because it's so complicated. I mean, how can you...
Well, it's garbage. It's garbage science. And you're talking to someone who went to the number one institute in the world. I have a PhD in engineering. I've taken fluid mechanics. In fluid mechanics, there's an equation called the Navier-Stokes equation. It is unsolvable for a turbulent fluid. There are 2 turbulent fluids here, the ocean and the atmosphere. And you're trying to solve 2 turbulent fluids to determine the level of CO2 affecting temperature.
Well
and
said.
120 models, and each one predicts, like the Baskin Robbins flavor of ice cream. One model predicts all the ice is going to melt. Another predicts
Right.
nothing's going to melt. And then every
Yeah.
flavor in between. Based on...
I like to politely interrupt you here.
Sure.
I'm a national park geek. I go
You're
to all
what?
national parks. I'm a national park geek,
Yeah.
U.S. national park
Yeah.
geek. If you just go to, as an example, Glacier National Park, or if you go to the Alps in Europe, I mean, in front of our eyes, we have seen glaciers retreat. Now, that's one empirical data point, I admit, from a statistical point of view. But that's one example. So, the reality is that ordinary people get affected by change. I'm just going to call it change, not climate change, but change. And the idea is to evolve and adapt with that. And how do science and leaders make people walk, adapt through change is something I'm thinking of. Back to you,
So
Dr. Shiva.
Rahul, here's the deal, right? The Earth, since the last ice age, will heat up around 2 degrees. It's a natural
Yes.
process, okay?
Yes. Yeah.
The issue is, I went to a BU professor presenting. He goes, "Oh my God, the oceans are getting more acidic." I said, "What are you talking about? The oceans can never get acidic. The pH will always have to be above 7.
Yeah.
I go, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, they're getting less basic." I said, "Why are they
Hmm.
getting less?" So people are making up shit. And the reason they're doing this is because there's $2 billion now out there. You put climate change on anything, you'll get funded. Dick Lindzen, who's the most important person on this. He's a professor, he's the head of the meteorology department of MIT. After I did my video exposing this Paris Accords, Dick wrote, and he said, no one should support it. This climate change stuff is nonsense. 140 professors wrote against him. Now, Dick was the youngest member of the National Academy of Engineering. Okay? So you have people like a cult following something. Yeah, you see ice melt, you see glaciers melt. This guy, Raja Ram, what's the name? The guy in India. One day he said ice is melting on the Himalayas, the next day he doesn't.
Yeah.
But he got a big payout by the Green Fund to say that.
Yeah.
So just because you observationally see something and you look at the history of geography and to make policies based on these sort of anecdotal stuff is just dumb. And then you have to realize where that stuff leads. Where does it lead? It leads to carbon tax. And that's where it's going to. The average American, the average company's price is going to go up, cost of living is going to go up. Now, and you're putting all these solar panels everywhere. No one has even considered the amount of cost of these solar panels to recycle them. You can just do the analysis. So people are getting on something because they think they're doing something right. But they're not, because what's happened is a vast majority of people don't understand the second law of thermodynamics. They may know Shakespeare, but they may not know second law of thermodynamics. Yeah. So we're living in an ignorant world where people think they're doing something good. I go hiking. I see things change. Climate is always changing. Always. There will be floods. There will be glaciers will go. The issue is how much. And the reality shows that the data is not there. In fact, you need CO2. Yeah. You need lots of CO2. CO2 is very good for the environment. Making CO2 a villain and then building an entire superstructure on that, you have to see who's making wealth on this. And who's change is important, right? Absolutely. Right, these people are creating.
Concluding on the questions we asked, right, in terms of practical policies as a precedent, right? For those who are dependent on traditional sources of energy, let's say fossil fuels, Texas oil industry, and clean tech, how would you balance that? Can we talk some specifics?
Well, let's talk about what clean tech is. There's one thing promoting the climate change carbon tax scam. The other is to reduce pollution. Two different things. The Paris Accords allows China to pollute, Rahul. It says you can pollute. And then after you pollute it to 2030, in order to, you're going to have to buy carbon credits. That's a scam. That has nothing to do. So why would you say it's okay to pollute? Yeah. So we're talking about multiple types of pollution. So pollution is different than making CO2 the enemy. That's nonsense. So yes, we should focus on microplastics, right? Yes, we should. By the way, my systems nonprofit is the one who's created the global standard for clean food. I don't know if you know that. Clean Food Certified. It is a global seal, a bottoms-up seal. You'll see it if you go to Whole Foods. You'll see it on certain foods, certain products. We're going to move into the medical area. You know how many syringes are done with plastics in them? Okay, so I have actually solutions. We've created the global standard for this, and it's a bottoms-up standard citizens created. created it in 2013. Whole Foods wanted me to help them do it as a standard when a raw food movement is coming out. So you're looking at someone who's actually created the standard for global clean food. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's a bottoms up thing, grassroots, bottoms up, not imposed by the government. So we have to talk about pollution, not about this nonsense over here. Because I can talk to you about windmills. Are they really efficient? Killing birds? We can talk about that, how many birds they kill every year, okay? The vibration that they create and the noise they create. We have made significant advances in chemical engineering in terms of extracting fuel from fossil fuel. And there's likely potentially infinite amounts of natural gas, infinite. Russia's sitting on about 98 quadrillion cubic feet of natural gas alone. So you have to go back and you have to say, let's look at the overall equation here. Carbon tax scam. Al Gore is not a scientist. The IPCC report is corrupt. But the end policies that they're proposing have nothing to do with lowering pollution. They have nothing to do with microplastics. They have nothing to do with increasing health. They have nothing to do with increasing lifespan. If anything, they're going to make people more bankrupt. They're going to take more tax out of people, create more stress. So we need to always keep our eyes on the ball and not get caught in a fad. So my policies would be, you focus, nuclear energy is a very powerful source of energy. It's gotten better and better and better, okay? Fusion. Why aren't we putting infinite amounts of dollars into fusion? MIT's had its fusion research lab there since 1981 when I went there. And they're all about hot fusion. You may remember when cold fusion people discovered. There is something going on. It was MIT which suppressed that research. The head of the MIT news organization, a physicist, left MIT because he saw the corruption. So you have phenomenon of energy that we can produce clean energy without having to do the stupid stuff of talking about carbon tax. But we do not put money into that, and it comes back to the same reason. Because a small set of people need to be in a world where they can control the masses, right? They don't want clean energy. They don't want infinite supply of energy, which we could get from many, many other sources, like cold fusion. And now 100 different labs have verified there is something going on with these weak nuclear reactions. Okay? Now, do you think any other presidential candidate can even talk about this but me? So I would be able to keep people honest. I may not be able to do all the work, but I know who's bullshitting us. The founders of the United States were architects, engineers, scientists. Look at Franklin, look at Jefferson, look at even Washington, surveyor. Compare that to Trump, who has to go and act like he's a worker at McDonald's. I mean, come on. Or Kamala Harris. These people are actors. You're looking at someone who came bottoms up, who actually did all the calculus equations, who actually mowed lawns, who actually played baseball, who actually has been working since I was 14 years old. Now compare me and yourself and compare them. They're not one of us, Rahul. Who should we have? One of us. So it's a very fundamental thing when it comes to energy policy. This nonsense about climate change leads to an energy policy which bankrupts the average person. The focus should be on real energy policy, which is innovation. But they don't want to put money into any of these true alternative energies. But I think nuclear is a very powerful area. But nuclear, particularly not just fission, but fusion reactors, and also cold fusion.
Thank you, Dr. Shiva, for those specific policies regarding energy. Next, some final reflection on policy. And again, my question is about bringing all Americans together, right? So this question is about women's rights and life, right? Again, having lived in rural America and having friends from different parts of conservative America, what I can say is that they truly care about life. They're coming from a good place. But at the same time, a lot of women in America today are asking about their fundamental rights. God forbid if they have outcome of an incest or rape or genetic problems in their developing fetus. Today, they can't have an abortion in different states in the United States. Now, again, I bring empathy in ideologies on both the sides. Now, that's what makes presidency such a difficult job. You got to care for all kinds of Americans, right? What would be your policy to balance pro-life and pro-choice?
So Rahul, when we take a systems approach, to understanding things, there is no contradictions. There's no dialectics created.
Mm-hmm.
Those in power create these fake dialectics, pro-life, pro-choice. So if you take a very objective systems approach to this, the solution's right in front of us, okay? So we're talking about pro-life. First of all, as a biologist, any biologist, if you just look at it very head-on, there's been over 100 papers written by biologists that when a sperm and an egg meet, there's a life created within 3 days, the epithelial forms, okay? Period. There is a new life. That's just an objective reality. So to say that there's not a life on either side is lying. So there's a life. The right wing says that they're pro-life. Well, they're hypocrites. They're pro-life only up until the 9 months. But when the baby comes out of the womb, they're fine if the baby, many of these pro-lifers, right-wingers, are supporting companies like Monsanto. They don't care that the fact that the mother may not have proper food. They don't care that the mother can get proper food. There's income inequality, right? That a very wealthy woman has far more choices than a poor woman. So after the baby comes out of the womb, they wash their hands. Then they don't talk anything. They're not talking about the policies of history of systemic racism. They're not talking about the policies of inequality. They're not talking about the agricultural base being destroyed. So that baby, after it comes out of the womb, lifespan is going to go down. It's not eating proper foods. They don't want to talk about that life. So they're pro-life. So someone's living for 90 years or 80 years, or let's say now 70 years. They're pro-life only for 1% at best. They're not pro-life for the other 99.99% of that life. So I would say they're 1% pro-life. Okay? Objectively. They're so focused on that. Now, on the pro-choice side, you have the same hypocrisy. I want to do whatever I want to do. Great. But when it came to vaccine mandates, those people were not pro-choice. They were not pro-choice on the masks. Okay? Everyone's constitution is different, which is what the ancient systems of Indian medicine teach. What's right for you may not be right for me, right? It's about boosting the, I mean, I could keep going on, but the same people who claim they're pro-choice were fine forcing people to get vaccinated. Okay? So you have a hypocrisy on both sides. How do you resolve this hypocrisy? Well, the hypocrisy gets resolved recognizing in the United States, we're a republic. And in the United States, the states, so the Supreme Court was right to deliver to the states. That's just a reality, okay? If one state decides that they want to, they don't believe in abortion, they have that right. And another state says you can't, they have that right, okay? So that's at a fundamental level of the American concept of a republic. But irrespective of that, if you are a woman who just had, whatever you did, frivolous sex, and you have a baby, understand that you are taking a life. So have responsibility. This comes down to responsibility. So on the alternative, let's talk about some of the cases you've said, where the situation of a woman growing up in such a horrible condition, right? To force that woman to do something that you know is going to be detrimental is also not right. You see what I'm saying? So, but I'm saying these choices must be made within the context of this system's thinking, that there is a life. So if you're going to take that life, yes, every woman I know who's ever had an abortion feels great remorse because they knew they took a life. But that did not mean why they did that under certain circumstances were not done for a rightful reason. You say? So you can't vilify them. But I'm telling you, the right-wing pro-lifers are not pro-life. They're 1% pro-life. Let them show to me that they're truly pro-life. I'm truly pro-life. My position is, it's a state's issue. And secondarily, I do think it should occur on a very rare occasion. And when those people are doing it, have great remorse. And those people who don't, who are doing it frivolously, I think that in their mind, they need to understand they are killing a life. You are killing a life, period. But you may have to kill to preserve something else and under certain situations. Those are very tough decisions. But to make this such a divisive issue is how the establishment divides us, when there's frankly no division here. And if you're for pro-choice, then truly be pro-choice. Don't enforce your health things on me. I refuse to take a untested drug. I came out heavily against the vaccine mandates. You see? So when you take this kind of thinking I've just shared, there is no divisiveness. It is about making people accountable. Okay, so you're a right-wing guy, you believe in pro-life? Okay, great. Then why are you supporting Monsanto? Why are you supporting pesticides in our soil? You're okay with that. So this is where the contradictions come in, and we must put the mirror up to these people's faces.
Yeah. Makes one think. Absolutely. Dr. Shiva, we reflected a lot on the policies, and I'm sure for our listeners, they get an idea on what alternative you offer, the way you think, the options you're offering them. Moving on, we want to reflect your life on your life as an innovator. So we mentioned revolutionizing politics in medicine. Let's talk more about that. What's the problem you're solving here, and what are you revolutionizing here?
Right. So, Rahul, so the fundamental theme that has always guided my life has been what I alluded to at the start of our conversation, the desire to integrate parts to understand the whole. Okay. And that is where the real great innovations come from, when you interconnect the parts. You see, it's between the parts, the interconnections that would make us interesting, not the parts unto themselves, how you interconnect things. I could give you a handful of 5, 10 gears. You can come up with a tricycle, and someone else may come up with a bicycle. And it's how you put the parts together. Okay. We have the same number of genes as a worm. I don't know if you know that. We have 25,000 genes. Same number of genes. When the Genome Project started, biologists thought we must have 1 million genes. We have the same number of genes as a worm. So what makes a human being different than a little worm? It's the fact that those genes and proteins are connected in ways, much more complex ways. So it's the interconnections. Okay. So once you understand this, you understand that truth is an emergent property of making these interconnections. So here I grew up in India, in Bombay, which had every culture you can think about, every religion, everyone got along. You didn't have Christians killing Hindus or Muslims killing Hindus. You didn't have that. People lived peaceably. In fact, you celebrated. You didn't think about them as a Muslim or Hindu. Yeah, this my friend, right? So I grew up in that world, seeing massive, you'd walk down the street in Bombay, you see a snake charmer here, then you'd see a guy wearing an Armani suit, and then you see a car, and then you see someone in a rickshaw. You see multiple levels of differences in one little scene. And that was further accentuated by the fact my grandparents lived in a small village in South India, which had no running water, right? Dirt roads. And my grandmother was a healer who had tattoos all over her arms, crazy earrings. And she was a village healer. She practiced Siddha and Ayurveda. And she didn't go to some school for Siddha. She was taught by traveling yogis and rishis. But she was a village healer, no degrees. And I saw her empirically heal people. People would come, she'd look at their face, understand their particular constitutions, and give them very different types of massage, mantras, yogas. I mean, I saw her heal people. So think about the world I grew up in, a very diverse world. Growing up in Bombay, being called all sorts of names by upper caste people, wanting to understand why I was called a Shudra, what that meant, right? In Bombay. So these incited me, wait a minute, my grandmother's here who has no degrees and she's healing people. Here, my best friend's mother's telling me, spitting on me, saying I can't go into his house. So these contradictions at a young age wanted me to understand them. So I became very deeply interested in politics as a 4-year-old. I read everything I could on revolutionary politics, Subhash Chandra Bose. There used to be these Indian comic books or, everything I could get a hold of. But I was also deeply interested in medicine. So that is the framework that I grew when my parents came to India from America in 1970. My dad had grown up in war-torn Burma, never saw a book until he was 10 years old. A teacher taught him mathematics under a mango tree. True stories, all of these. When I look back at this as norm, people say, is that true? Yeah. And in that village, and he ended up becoming an engineer. Gopala Singhania was one of the leading industrialists of India, was so impressed by my father. In 1968, he sent my dad here for training. My dad was an extraordinary person. My mother grew up in a completely different circumstance. Her father ran off with another woman. She was homeless by the time she was with 8 children. The family got split up, and she ends up getting a math degree. So I grew up with these two extraordinary people. And then both of them came to Bombay, you see? So it is a 1 in a trillion chance that my parents came to the United States. My dad came here. He came here for training into the United States. He was so good. They said, we can't train you. You know more than us. They invited him. Then he came here a few years later. 2 years later, we had to wait. My sister and I, and my mother waited. Legal immigration. We settled, first of all, in Paterson, New Jersey in 1970, one of the poorest cities in the United States, at a time when there's very few Indians.
Yeah.
Okay, my friends were other black kids, right? But it was like Bombay. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll at the time. It was Vietnam War. It was a wild place, Paterson, New Jersey. No different than the streets of Bombay in some sense, okay? You would see people getting killed on TV, which is a Vietnam War. But my parents would keep moving to the better public school system. So it went from Paterson, then to Clifton. And again, very few Indians here at the time, very few. And then eventually to Livingston High School, which is a pretty much all Zionist high school where Jewish kids think they're the chosen people of God. I won every award. Every math award was a star, baseball player and soccer player. And this perturbed certain people. Out of 4,000 kids, my sister and I were the only dark-skinned Indian kids. So we had to break through boundaries that most Indians take for granted today who come here now. So, but by the time I was 14, Rahul, I had finished all calculus. I was a very ambitious kid because I knew in India people had nothing. And I knew the stories of my parents. So I saw America as an opportunity there that I must excel. I must be number one. So I got 800 on my SATs when the SATs were really difficult, not now. Okay? 800 out of 800. And I was a number one student. And even in that school, people would try to keep me out of exams. In one of my schools, even though I was the best kid, they would not invite me to the competition to prove that I was the best. And my mom and dad had to go fight. You see, so I grew up in that environment where we had to fight.
Yeah.
And my mom said you would have to get an A++ even to get an A. So I had to do much better. But that's so I grew up in an environment of having to excel to even get what I was getting. So by the 9th grade, I had finished up calculus. My high school had no more math classes. That was offered at the 12th grade. And then my mom saw a little ad in a newspaper that New York University's 1977 was going to invite 40 kids in the United States to come to New York University at the Cornell Institute of Mathematical Sciences, the #1 mathematical institute in the world. And those kids would get to learn computer science with the leading professors at NYU and graduate students. I was not the age, you had to be 16. I was 14. I applied and I got accepted. And I was the only Indian kid who went from New Jersey there. And I graduated #1 in that class. And after I finished that, I had to finish up some humanities courses. I ended up getting a full-time job at a small medical college in Newark, New Jersey, what is now known as Rutgers University. Okay. And in that university, I was given a job. And my superior, who's still alive, Dr. Michael, said, we're going to treat you as an equal. Even though you're a 14-year-old kid, we know what you can do. You have to come to work. And I was given a full-time job while finishing up. So the high school made a way that I could go into Newark 30 miles away and I could come back every day. And I was given a task initially to understand while babies were dying in their sleep, to analyze data, what you would call AI. Analysis of data to predict when a baby would stop sleeping. Because I was, again, very interested in medicine. This was a medical school. And I proved myself doing that. And then I was given another task to convert the old-fashioned inter-office mail system. Not the simple exchange of text messages. We're talking about this entire system. Many of you over the age of 40 may remember there was a paper-based system before email called, where it had the inbox, the outbox, physical folders. You actually had carbon paper. You had the typewriter. It was a very complex system how offices in the world communicated through pneumatic tubes, through people. And I was asked to convert that entire system consisting of about 100 different features, Rahul, into the electronic version. And I wrote that system in a programming language called Fortran and 8K of memory. And I named that system email as a 14-year-old kid, a term never used before. So I wrote the code, named it email. And several years later, I got the first U.S. copyright for that invention, recognizing me as the inventor of email. Now, I was brought to be a humble Indian kid. My parents didn't have a PR team like Bill Gates' parents. I went to MIT, was on the front page of MIT when I came in. The president of MIT said, you must apply for the copyright because the U.S. Patent Office doesn't know what software is. That's how new this was.
Yeah.
And I did that. I was given the first US copyright recognizing me as the inventor of email. Forgot about it. Okay. But that was revolutionary. When I was writing that email system, many of the surgeons would say, why are you doing this? I just simply like going and dictating to my secretary. She does it. But people thought it was impossible. In 1977, a bunch of the leaders in the military industrial complex, companies like Raytheon predecessors, were saying that it would be impossible to create a system like this. They were doing simple text messaging at best. Maybe a caveman version of Facebook. They did not create email. I'll come back to that. But that's what I did as a 14-year-old kid before I came to MIT, Rahul, saying that great innovations occur at the outskirts. You don't have to go to MIT. In fact, a 14-year-old boy is the one who invented TV, Philo Farnsworth. Very similar story. Okay, then you can read about him. So when I came to MIT, my interest was always in medicine. The creation of email was actually a side effect of working in that medical school. So I was very interested in figuring out how my grandmother was able to observe your face and diagnose you. So I started doing lots of many different research papers and my master's and my PhD in different areas of pattern analysis, really the foundations of AI in the 1990s. Okay, most of this AI stuff has been done in the 60s. It's really sort of passé in some ways, okay, from a science standpoint. So I ended up creating another company because I created a set of algorithms to automatically analyze all different kinds of patterns. I ended up winning a White House contest to analyze President Clinton's email. So between 1978 to 1993, email was an office application. Some people may not know this. In local area networks, you don't need the internet for email, right? So the email I created started showing up in other ways. Eudora, AOL, when the web came, email became a web-based app, okay? And that's when it became a consumer app, but email was predominantly used in the office environment because it was a print version going to the electronic version. Clinton was starting to get lots of email correspondence, and they had to have interns automatically reading and processing this. They would print out the email. This is how new this was. So the White House ran a contest to automatically analyze email and route it. I ended up winning that as a graduate student. I left MIT and I started a company called EchoMail, which was revolutionary. An AI-based system to read email, route it for customer service. Won many awards. We grew that to around a $250 million company. Again, radical. And we ran it in the cloud in 1993. Companies would log in and they would process their email using our technology. Now, this was, again, it seems like email always sort of would taking away from me from my interest in medicine. So one day after growing that company, we sold a piece of it, made a lot of money. We had our own building. I was walking back to MIT to visit one of my professors randomly. And he said, Shiva, you must get back involved in medicine and finish back your PhD. I was at that time 40 years old now, okay? I'd started my original PhD when I was in my 20s and left it to start EchoMail. And he said, look, there's a new field called systems biology. We have figured out that we have the same number of genes as a worm, and we want to mathematically model the whole human cell. If we can do that, we can eliminate the need for animal testing and revolutionize big pharma.
Interesting.
So that's what I came back to do, Rahul. So I created a powerful technology for my PhD called Cytosolve, Cytosolve.
Okay.
Cytosolve allows us to mathematically model any disease on the computer. It's taken us 16 years to validate this and prove it now. And we're going after every major disease. And we're using combinations of natural compounds, which is what the Siddhars and the Ayurvedic people did, but we can validate it. You may see a bottle back there. So we modeled all the molecular pathways of osteoarthritis, and we developed a product called MV25, which is a combination of two ingredients from bitter orange and chamomile flowers, which has phenomenal effects on reducing pain and inflammation. But now we're going after all the 35 major diseases without the need for animal testing. So that's what I mean, revolutionizing medicine. Cytosolve is the digital version of the molecular system, no different than email was the digitization of the interoffice mail system.
Interesting.
Okay? So when I finished the development of that in my PhD in 2007, I did take 2 years off and I went back to India. And now I have my PhD. I have all these degrees from MIT, and I wanted to really explore ancient systems of Siddha and Ayurveda. And what I uncovered was that these ancient systems of medicine were not a system of medicine. They matched one-to-one with engineering system science. When the ancients used vata, pitta, kapha, karma, this was a karma fall. These were input and output, transport, conversion, storage. So I made a major breakthrough in integrating Western system science with ancient systems of medicine. When I came back, I taught a course at MIT called Systems Health, and it became a lecture series to both Western trained doctors and alternative people. And then that has now become my own institute where we are re-educating doctors, physicians, anyone. I could take anyone and essentially teach them how to be a quote unquote, have to be careful, have to put it in quotes, a doctor. How you look at the body as a system, it's a completely different language, but it is deeply connected to these ancient systems of Ayurveda and Siddha. So what I have revolutionized is, yes, I created email, but we have cytosol, which allows us to discover from 10 to the power of 32 chemicals in the universe what combinations can cure many diseases. We have systems health, which is we're educating, we're created a systems health education program. By the way, health coaching is going to be a $30 billion industry. I have literally created a new vocation called systems health education, which is combining ancient systems of Ayurveda and Siddha, but integrating with Western engineering principles. It's a whole new field. I've had to create the institute, the books, etc. And then we have the clean food certified thing. You see, so we are revolutionizing food and medicine and truth, freedom, health. So you take all these concepts and we're educating leaders how to actually shatter the swarm, how to change the world. And that's what the running for president is. We have now have people who are being educated, the same system science that's being used to manipulate people for power, profit, control. We have created a system science to liberate people for truth, freedom, health. So truth, freedom, health is itself a system. It's a knowledge system. So that's what I mean. It's a revolutionary environment, but all of this would not have been possible if I wasn't born in India and made in America. You see?
Beautiful. Yeah. No, absolutely. Love this segment, by the way. We truly reflected upon, your journey in life, but how you use that to connect the dots. In fact, how that shapes your thinking. And I would argue the biggest system we live is in the universe. We are not disconnected of it or by it. We are part of it. And that's what should inspire anybody, even a voter, to think from a systems point of view.
And the other thing, Rahul, is all the great things in the universe occur at the edges. Okay? If you look at a cell, the interesting thing occur at the cell membrane. If you look at a society, things occur at the edges. Email did not come from the MIT or the military industrial complex. And this is very powerful. The concept of center has been a brainwashing. All the great things occur at the edges of ordinary people taking on problems. Okay? And in my book, System and Revolution, I talk about this, where things occur at the edges. We used to think the Earth was a center. Then we said, no, the sun is a center. Well, the sun's actually not the center. Oh, the Milky Way is a center. No, there is no center to anything. And this is hard for human beings to fathom because we have a very hubris about ourselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
excellent. All right. So we would now move to the last segment of our discussion. Communication. It sounds like a very simple thing, but there's some deeper questions out here. If you look at the politics of Ronald Reagan or, in the 1960s, right, it was a very civil discourse that happened mostly. But then Donald Trump comes and, in a way, revolutionizes the way communication is done, right? A lot of people who vote for him would say he says things as they are. A lot of people like it, but a lot of people do not like it as well. Now you call a spade a spade. I'm not comparing you with Donald Trump anyways, but you tend to call a spade a spade. You will catch the bull by the horns. Now, if people do Google search about you, they would put words like controversial, to your name, and that may disassociate a lot of people from really digging deeper and understanding your ideas, right? Now, again, I want to come back to my question. How does an independent candidate in this country communicate so that even mainstream media, right, is able to take their message for the betterment of the society and create healthy alternatives in the political discourse? Right? So there's a larger question I want to ask here about the way one communicates for a job like presidency of the US when they really want to call a spade a spade?
Yeah, so let's discuss this. So, I don't know if you know, I have one of my degrees is in communications, at the Media Lab.
Yeah.
So this is something, so if you look at the history of communications, the original way people communicated, Rahul, was we would sit around a fire and people would tell stories, epic stories. My grandmother in that village, I would lie in her lap and she would tell me stories that would go on for 2 hours, or Ramayana or Mahabharata or something, right? They're amazing
Yeah.
stories. So human beings actually like long form stories. Now, in the early 1900s, Edward Bernays came up with this concept of the soundbite. And those in power realized that they needed to manipulate people. They did not want people to actually be intelligent anymore. So the model of advertising emerges, the 30-second soundbite. And that model of communications was to make people become the entertained or be consumers or watch, you see? And so if you wanted to make people consumers and not participants, you needed to reduce them to sound bites, quick fix statements, okay?
Yeah.
But behind those quick fix statements were actually nothing. This is very different than where you have a quick fix statement, but it leads you to a thread to something larger, okay? Now, as someone who studied communication, I used to teach one of the most popular communication classes at MIT called Systems Visualization. The way I look at it is you have the long form story. I call it an information pyramid, the deep story. Okay. For example, how the few control the many. It's a very complex story. And then you have to bring it to a level, let's say people may not have 2 hours to watch a YouTube video. Then you have to bring it to maybe a diagram, an infographic, a quick movie, a 15-minute version. Then you may have to bring it to a one-liner, right? Shatter the swarm. You see? Now, I am doing something that Donald Trump has no depth. His goal is to be the Edward Bernays model of just saying something crazy to get attention. So when I met with him for 2 hours after, I know this guy, he's used a lot of my stuff to raise his $500 million. As he was talking, let me use that. That's a great slogan. Let me use that. So he's in the Edward Bernays model. Now, I don't think I can curse on your show, right? I don't want to, but I came up with the term that I'm the only candidate who's not a Zionist, and you can fill it in. Okay. You can find it. That went viral. But behind that statement is a 2-hour video explaining what Zionism is.
Yeah.
So I have the breadth of communication where I can make it into a soundbite, be poetic about it. Our slogan, Jason, do you have one of our cards? Maybe Jason. Our card says save yourself. It's got a picture of me, learn how to fight. That's okay. But that is a leading message. But behind that card is a graphs. And then it says, now you have a little card, which this much real estate, but it drives people to shatter the swarm.
Yeah.
A 15-minute video. Then they can go see a 1-hour version. You see, that's an information pyramid. So my communication is much more deliberate, artistic, and educational. It is not just to simply say nonsense so you can own the griftosphere. You see? That's what Trump does. And Trump has nothing backing it except playing the theatrical games. And that's what he does. He's taken Edward Bernays into a way because he's about advertising. Trump is not a businessman. The way he's a businessman, he holds a phone like this. Friends of mine who work for him know about him. He's been bankrupt. He did casinos, which are basically money laundering operations. He was put on the track to become president by Wilbur Ross. Okay? So you have to understand these people are not real. My communications, you can go look at my videos. They're 2-hour videos and people watch them. And then I create this small segment and then I have to have a small slogan. So the slogan is beyond vax and anti-vax. Boost your immune system. What do you mean by that? Well, I teach people how does vitamin D, and then you go down to the depths. I teach people molecular systems. What other quote unquote politician is doing that? They can't. They don't have the skills. They didn't put in the time. They watch polls. Someone says, say this, lock her up. Did Trump lock anyone up? No, he locked his people up, right? So, in the ancient systems of yoga and meditation, Rahul, the great Rishi said we have 3 types of intelligence. The instinctive mind, which is the lower chakras. The intellectual mind, which is the mind of logic and using math and you know, A and B and C, this kind of stuff. And then we have the intuitive mind. Now, these people go at the instinctive mind, the lowest points, and they want people to act, react. I have set up a way that we have all three, right? So when people come through our journey, you watch Shatter the Swarm, or you see Save Yourself, or you see Why Does Dr. Shiva Attacking the Zionists? But then I lead you immediately understand why. And then we bring you into this larger area of systems thinking. So I'm giving people to go from kindergarten level all the way up to a PhD level of consciousness. That is what Truth, Freedom, and Health is. They're not doing that. They want to rob the person of their money. I mean, Trump used all of my material showing the actualities of election fraud. And then Mike Lindell used my material, Make It Wackadoodle, to sell pillows. There are substantial things, but Trump used it to raise $500 million, of which he only spent $9 million. We don't know where the other 491 million went. You see? So I think my communication, I do a lot of these whiteboard communications, very quick. So people, so I want to respect my audience, but I have to figure out a way to crack the code. And I figured that out. That shattertheswarm.com video, anyone can understand it. And it's illuminating, it's deep. It does not take advantage of my audience. But people say, holy shit, this is the kind of guy that should be the president. How much did I learn in 15 minutes? Yeah. And that's what I do. And I have a talent for doing that, of taking very complex things. I could do a soundbite. I could call you the best 4-letter words like Booby effing Kennedy, what he is. But I can teach you why we created a website called rfkexposed.com. We lead you into why I call him that, why people should understand he's a charlatan. You say? Yeah. So, but they don't do that. They just give you a soundbite and they have you fighting all day at the instinctive level. I bring you up through the higher chakras in some ways.
Sure. Thank you for explaining that, Dr. Shiva. That brings us to the last question, the identity of being Indian American. And there's a context to it. I'll begin by saying, USA is a country of immigrants. First, of course, there were English pioneers. But then, of course, there were Irish Americans that went through their own level of acceptance in the society. And then Italian Americans. We are here in Boston, so very Irish and Italian city. But then now we have Indian Americans being active in politics, entertainment, what have you. Now, I'm sure we would have a listener here from Nebraska, Iowa, heartland of America. We would also have listeners in Indians who are either supporting, Trump or Kamala. I want to reflect back on an immigrant who came to the US at the age of 7, which is you, became a naturalized citizen. You talk about ancient Indian knowledge, but I want to go beyond silos of being Indian, right? But rather be in the realm of philosophy and ideas, right? Talk to that voter in Nebraska and Iowa, or that Indian American voter in Florida or Boston, about the identity of being Indian American, right? And how we would relate with their interests, their way of life, their world, and be a precedent for them.
So, Rahul, I'm 60 years old, okay? People need to understand I've been here for 53 years. So my life, my journey is very different than Kamala Harris's journey, who was sitting in Montreal learning French, okay? I grew up in working class neighborhoods. I played baseball, right? I was, in fact, such a good pitcher, I could have gone on to the major leagues. So I grew up as an American. I was made in this country. Now, my running mate is from Nebraska, from the heartland of Nebraska, okay? So I grew up in New Jersey at the time where there were no Indians. When I came to MIT, all the Indians who were there were from India, who would always try to figure out my last name to try to figure out how they could discriminate against me by caste. So my friends at MIT were poor white kids, Hispanic kids, black kids. Okay? So it's been a very different journey. It's not like you have a lot of Indians today. Okay? My next door neighbor, Lorraine, is still my best friend from Lake Hiawatha since I was 13, 14 years old. I still have roots there, right? So you have to understand, I grew up in a much way of an American way of life, probably more than the interesting thing. The Indians who came here 1990s or later, they still never really fully integrated in this country because they could go back and forth. You see, they could stay in their little Indian enclaves. I was forced to integrate, but not assimilate. Very two different things. Integrate is different than assimilating, which means I kept these deep memories of growing up in India, the depth of the culture in some sense, but I integrated, you see? So this is a very different experience. So you look at our campaign, how many Indians in our campaign? I think 3 out of the hundreds of thousands of people. Quite fascinating. Who comes to our campaign? The quality, they're independent-minded people of all different backgrounds. If you talk to Crystal Ellis, she's actually an American who grew up here, and her father was a veteran in Korean War, and her mother's Korean. And most of our leaders all over the United States are all Americans. They don't view me as an Indian American or an American as an Indian. They view me as a fighter who has their interests at heart, you see?
Yeah.
So what has happened is that those in power have always wanted to bucket people because it is a way of manipulating through exploitation, particularly so if you're an Indian, you must talk like this, sit under a yoga tree and meditate, right? Or if you're a blonde woman, you must be dumb. Or if you're a white person, you must be a redneck who likes to beat up black people. I mean, these are things that they've created. Or if you're Chinese, you must know Kung Fu. And if you look at the stereotypes, this is what's done. And this is the real racism. It's to take people and put them into little buckets. Okay? Right. The problem I think people have had with me is, on the one hand, wait a minute, he has a degree from MIT. Why is he using 4-letter words? He says this doesn't compute, right? Because people have these notions of people in their nice little buckets. Oh, you're a scientist. You must be a nerd. You can't be strong. You must probably be bent over with little glasses and have a squeaky voice and, you know, make real weird twitches. And I saw, by the way, when I came to MIT, I'd see absolutely healthy kids in 1 year start developing these behaviors.
Interesting.
To act like they're intelligent. Okay? So we have created these behavioral things of what it means to be anyone or anything. And once you put people into that bucket, you can say, oh, you get paid only $5 an hour. You're a woman. And you get paid $2 an hour. Or you can be a celebrity. You can be this. You see, it's all very beautifully bucketed. And then you can market to those people through consumer marketing. So that's where all of this comes from. It comes from the Edward Bernays model of creating target market groups, putting people into those groups and keeping them in those groups. It's much better model of control. So that is, from a philosophy standpoint, people need to understand this. And so many, many years ago, 1993, when I was doing my research in a field called information cybernetics, a field that I had created for my PhD work, it's really predecessor of all this modern AI stuff. I had a dream. I woke up in the dream. In the dream, I'm pretty awoke. It was a very lucid dream, and I'm sitting next to a robot that looks like me. And the question that goes in my mind is, what is the difference between me and that robot? This will occur one day. There will be a robot that will look like you. It can have all these mannerisms. It'll have emotions, what's called affective computing. So the issue is, what is the difference between this thing you call a robot and you? It's a very deeply philosophical question. And the conclusion I came to is, a human is something that can experience loss or a deep sense of love. Okay? And without those two things, a robot may be able to experience this. And there are humans who don't experience that. Are they really human? They're robotic. And I would argue there are many humans who are robots. Oh, I grew up in this family. I'm an Indian. And I was told this and this. And they just continue that robotic trend. At a certain point in life, you must ask, what am I? Who am I? You're grown up as a Catholic doing certain rituals. Oh, am I that? Or you're grown up as a Muslim. Or you're grown up as this or whatever. These are all cultural programmings that the firmware that you were given. But you are not that. And at a certain point, people have to ask, who am I? What is the meaning of life? What does existence mean? What does meaning mean? And these questions are important questions people must delve into. And if people don't ask those questions, in my view, they're robots. They're just following a robotic pattern. Now, I was forced to ask those questions because of this very diverse environment. I remember coming here in 1970 and then going back to India in 1975 when my grandmother was dying, back to that village. And I remember seeing everyone had no no shoes. My aunt lived in a little hut. And that's when it dawned upon me, holy shit, in 24 hours, I'm going to go to a different world on a TWA flight. And these people are going to live here. And they love me deeply. And I remember leaving the train station, those old caboose trains, and my grandparents coming to see me, crying. And I realized how much love they had for me. And it was that instant, literally, I can't explain it, but energy flew from the top of my head to the bottom of my spine. And it said, you must do something. You must not be a parasite. And a decision went through. It was like a divine intervention of sorts as a 12-year-old, that it would be reckless if I went back and I did not understand why they worked so hard in the fields and they were barely surviving. But they had such great love for me and my family, you see? So it was this deep sense of love that motivated me, of that 12-year-old kid, to understand that these kinds of inequities were wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what brings me to today. Nothing has changed, you see?
Yeah.
So I remember when I was a kid, there were stories of villagers taking up arms because they didn't have enough food. And I remember this very distinctly. I was 5 years old. And I said, and my father's friend said, oh, these people are killing other people. I said, why are they doing that? He goes, oh, they don't have food. I said, what's wrong with that? And he said, oh, your son's a communist. Now, for a kid, the injustice is there. You don't have food and they want to get food, and this guy is hoarding food, right? Like, what's wrong, right, with this picture here? And so my dad said, oh, don't worry, he will get over this. I never have gotten over it, Rahul. So I have, over the last 55 years, understood these systems of oppression. I've been able to articulate it, concretize it into a field, which is under truth, freedom, and health. Yes, I invented email, Cytosolve, and all these other things. But what I have created now is crack the code and how we alleviate human beings from oppression at a deep level. There was a time when human beings said we couldn't fly. There was a time people said we couldn't have light bulbs. Well, Bernoulli's principle changed flight and electromagnetism. What I'm here to tell you is, with all humility, I have uncovered the scientific principles of how we obliterate oppression. And that fundamental principles comes from integrating Eastern systems of medicine with Western engineering science. And what has come out of that is a new body of knowledge. And that is what the person in Nebraska, Crystal, is learning. That is what the person in New Jersey is learning. People of all diverse backgrounds. This is the unification. When you take a systems approach with the curricula and the knowledge that I've developed, it gives humanity an opportunity to come here without having to bow down a guy with wearing a turban and a robe, right? That's what occurs in that environment. Or going to an MIT, you see? Two different elitist worlds. I've seen the elitism among the gurus and rishis of India and the elitism of the Harvards and the MIT of the world.
Absolutely. Dr. Shiva, this has been such a wholesome discussion about constitution, running for presidency, your policies, science, systems thinking, and I would say the ability to think independently for ourselves. Your journey has been a journey of fight, achievement, connecting the dots, and creating something new. Very inspiring. Finally, Dr. Shiva, just to wrap this up, what is the message you would want to give to any American listening to the show about why vote for Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai in 2024 US presidential elections? Your closing thought.
Yeah, anyone listening out there, you must vote or write me in. Why? Why is the answer? What's the answer to that question? The answer is quite simple. My running for president is the ultimate reflection of what the founders of this country wanted. The founders who created this country were people they were all immigrants from different backgrounds. And their fundamental goal was to ensure that you had a direct relationship with your creator. And all the inequities between that were removed. That's what they really were shooting for at a very deeply fundamental level, if you read their writings. And the solutions, my running itself is a reflection of that. It is ultimately for you to want to save yourself and to be the light. That's what this is about. Do you, as an individual in a finite lifespan, want to experience the fullness of being a human being? And if you think it's about Trump versus Kamala Harris, who haven't even delved into this, they're about making billions, exploiting people, serving genocide. and essentially exploiting the humanity of most people to dumb people down. It is a path that has nothing to do with what, in my view, what any type of creator wanted for you. So our movement, My Running for President, gives people an opportunity to say, wait a minute, what does winning really mean? What is winning now? Winning is you. So our slogan is save yourself. No one is coming to save you. Now, this is a much higher standard for being an American. And that is the standard that I espouse. And that's the standard that we want for people. So when you go in and you vote for Dr. Shiva, or you write me in, this is not about me. It's about you. It's about you saying, I'm going to raise my standards to a much different level for myself and my kids. And raising that standards means I don't like cost of living going up and printing of money. Raising that standards doesn't mean it's absolutely wrong that my child will have a shorter lifespan than me in a very immediate way. But this is about saving yourself. Now, our movement, My Running for Office, has created those tools. It gives you the opportunity to experience a community of real Americans, for that matter, real humans. And that has never occurred before in U.S. history, and in my view, world history. People have assumed that a small set of people should rule over the many. No different than looking at the birds and saying only birds can fly. That is a fundamental aspect of My Running for President. It offers people completely a new possibility of themselves. So you're not voting for me. The victory is you getting to that and raising your standards.
Dr. Shiva, with that, we wrap up the podcast. Everybody, thank you for joining our show. Hopefully you enjoyed the discussion. It was a very invigorating and reflective discussion. Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Closing the podcast now.
Thank you very much, Rahul. Be the light.